Great. I can see everybody's joining us. Fantastic. Okay. Well, great. We have a great session planned for us all today. So welcome everyone to the second day of our multi-day 30 by 30 virtual conference. To begin, I acknowledge I am a visitor and a settler on these lands, and my 2 feet are grounded on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Atchison peoples. And we meet today on a virtual platform. I know we are spread across the country, and I acknowledge the importance of recognizing the first peoples of all the lands. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and territorial and traditional territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations peoples that have lived here for millennia before us. I also send my deepest respect and appreciation for the elders and the traditional knowledge keepers who have shared and continue to share their wisdom with their own communities and non-Indigenous Canadians. I especially want to thank Elder Claudette Commanda for starting our multi-day conference last week with her prayer and heartfelt words. We received overwhelming support and positive feedback from our session last week. And thank you all if you were able to help share your comments last week and attended with us. So we heard from Elder Commanda, our keynote speaker, Charlene Theodore, inspired many of you, and the amazing panel of Indigenous engineers who are women, led by moderator Denise Poitier, and included Esther Escott, Catherine Levesque, and Monica Rumbold. And that was really a very eye-opening panel. The recording for that session last week, as well as this week and our 2 weeks following, will be available on our conference website in the coming months. So just a few pieces of housekeeping before we begin. If we could go to the next slide, please. We will start the session with a panel discussion, followed by 4 concurrent mini workshops presented by each speaker. And just a little bit on the slide here, there's information if you need to access the French. So we have simultaneous interpretation, and you can see the instructions on the screen there. We also have closed captioning. People should have that enabled right away. If you don't, you can see that in your the menu at the very bottom. You should be able to find the closed captioning option as well. If you have any troubles throughout the session, we'd ask you to enter in your technical questions into the chat. And we have a great team from Encore with Jeff and Andrew who are helping us out with that. So you can send your questions to them. So back to the session today. After our panel discussion, we will have a chance to go into workshops, mini workshops with each of the 4 panelists in breakout rooms. So all of you, our participants, will need to choose a workshop after our plenary discussion. So you'll do that by clicking on the breakout room tab at the bottom and then clicking to the specific link with the room that you want to join. The rooms will be labeled so you know each regulator panelist and where they are. And the workshops will be the best place for you to ask your questions, to discuss details with the panelists, and basically have a bit of a one-on-one with the panelists and hear a bit more about the work that they're doing. So that's why we ask during the plenary, you can hold off with your more detailed questions and save that for the workshop. That's really going to be the best place for you. So the workshops are going to last for about 30 minutes, and we'll make sure to keep everybody on track in terms of the timing. We also encourage people to make sure that you have the most recent version of Zoom installed. And you could also ask some of those questions in the chat to our tech support. So during our panel discussion before the workshops, we ask that everyone except the speakers turn off your mics and cameras. Once you are in the breakout rooms, you can turn on your cameras and have an engaging discussion. Like I said, you can use the chat if you have general questions or technical issues throughout. We won't have a Q&A in the plenary since the workshops will cover a lot of that. So we're all here to learn, and we expect everyone to maintain an open mind and to be respectful of your comments and behaviors, both to speakers and to the other attendees. Please be mindful of how your words might impact others. We will not accept any toxic or discriminatory or demeaning comments, and we will be monitoring the chat throughout the session. So without further ado, and we can just turn off the slides, I'd like to introduce our moderator. So I'm very, very happy that Lisa has agreed to join us today. Lisa Stepnick is the Director of Equity and Representation at Engineers Geoscientists Manitoba, working on the 30 by 30 initiative since 2018. Lisa is the graduate of Biosystems Engineering at the University of Manitoba, and she has worked as an engineer in training at Building Alternatives Inc., designing straw bale, timber frame, and corewood residences and commercial buildings. She also worked in the environmental engineering field, conducting phase 1 site assessments of commercial and industrial sites. Lisa is a mother of 3, a community organizer, and a DJ at queer dance parties and drag shows. She is a pleasure to work with. It's just been so much fun getting to know her and working with her on 30 by 30. So thank you, Lisa, for all the work that you do to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion in engineering, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Cassandra, and likewise, it's always a pleasure to be working with you. I'm joining you all today from Treaty 1 territory, my home, as a white settler. And it's also the power that comes from Treaties 5, 3, and 2 that enables me to join you online. My water comes from Treaty 3 territory, and most of my food is grown on Treaty 2 and Treaty 1 territory. And I think about the resource extraction that we all participate in as engineers and geoscientists, or that those resource extraction projects require the work of engineers and geoscientists. And I think about how that allows me to work and live on this territory. I'd also like to take a moment of silence just before we start to acknowledge again the 215 children who were found in Kamloops, BC, as well as the family that was murdered just the other day. I think we have a lot of work to do, as we all can acknowledge, looking at white supremacy in Canada and how it continues on in our laws and our policies, our actions and inactions. And I'd like to also just acknowledge that one of the women killed the other day, Madiha Salman, was an environmental engineer. And I think about some of the things that Muslim women face in terms of belonging and inclusion in workplaces, given laws like the one in Quebec, given things like security certificates, the things that demonize Muslim people across our country. So if we could just take a few moments to acknowledge their passing and reflect on that. Thank you. And I'll introduce now our panelists for today. We're really excited that you'll all be joining us to share your insights in the work that we're all trying to advance together and learn from each other. So our first panelist is Marcy Cochrane, who holds an MBA and is a professional engineer. Marcy is an engineering sector leader with strengths in project management and delivery, diversity and inclusion research, strategic planning, and leadership. She is passionate about leading others to take action and catalyzing change within organizations and industries. Located in Kamloops, BC, Marcy is the 30 by 30 coordinator for Engineers and Geoscientists BC. She also works as a consultant supporting engineering sector organizations, including the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies of BC, with equity, diversity, and inclusion programs, leadership programs, and strategic planning. Her MBA research project, which examined retention of women in engineering in British Columbia, combined with her experience working in the sector, provides a strong foundation for her EDI work within engineering. With over 15 years experience in the practice of engineering, Marcy has worked in a number of different sectors, including consulting, public sector, and private industry. Marcy obtained her Bachelor of Electrical Engineering from the University of Victoria and Master of Business Administration from Royal Roads University. Marcy received the Chancellor's Award for Highest Academic Excellence from the Royal Roads Scholars of Business in 2019 and was nominated for the Governor General's Gold Medal for Top Master's Level Student Thesis in 2018 for her research on the retention of women engineering. Thanks for joining us, Marcy. Mohamed Aldali has a master's degree and is also a professional engineer. He is the Director of Outreach and Product Services at APEGA. In his role, Mohamed oversees APEGA's outreach and diversity and inclusion portfolios while providing guidance to hundreds of volunteers in APEGA's 10 branches across the province. He has over 20 years of project management and leadership experience and has led many projects to successful completion. Mohammed is a registered professional engineer with APEGA, holds a master's degree in civil engineering, and is a graduate of Cornell University's Diversity and Inclusion program. He also holds a Canadian Certified Inclusion Professional designation from the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, and was recently recognized by CCDI as the Diversity and Inclusion Practitioner of the Year. Mohammed is also the recipient of the Human Rights Award from the John Humphrey Center for Peace and Human Rights for his efforts to promote STEM education of underrepresented groups and Indigenous communities. Thank you so much for joining us, Mohammed. Tracy Caruana is a professional engineer with a degree in mechanical engineering from McMaster University. She joined PEO in January 2014 in the role of EIT coordinator and has since moved into the position of manager, engineering intern programs. Prior to joining PEO, Tracy worked at Hatch Limited for 9 years, gaining exposure in numerous projects within the mining industry. She worked as a piping engineer for 7 years and in management consulting for the remainder. In the role of manager, engineering intern programs, Tracy is responsible for providing guidance and support for the EIT program, the student membership program, and the licensure assistance program. In addition, she is the staff advisor for PEO's 30 by 30 task force. Thank you for joining us, Tracy. Justin Haley is the communications advisor for PEG-NL, a role which includes diversity and inclusion planning for the organization. Since graduating with a Bachelor of Public Relations from Mount St. Vincent University in Nova Scotia, Justin has gained over a decade of experience in communications management with a special focus in nonprofit and community-minded work. Prior to starting with PEG-NL in 2018, Justin was employed in roles related to youth advocacy, healthcare, assault prevention and survivor support, and municipal relations. In his spare time, Justin is an avid yet middling pool player. And when the weather cooperates, he also enjoys visiting some of the many corners of his home province. Thank you for joining us, Justin.
Thank you, Lisa.
So we're going to begin with each presenter just showing a few of their slides and doing a brief presentation on the work that they're doing. And as said by Cassandra, you will get to ask them questions individually about their presentations in the breakout rooms and possibly a little bit after those breakout rooms. So I think we're starting with Marcy. And if those slides come up, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Let me just pull up the right screens here. I think there should be one, if there's 2 slides. Is there one that you can go back 1 slide? Thank you. Okay, so as Lisa explained, I'm the 30 by 30 coordinator at Engineers and Geoscientists BC. In this role, I lead the implementation of the organization's 30 by 30 action plan, and am the organization's representative on the Engineers Canada National 30 by 30 working groups. Engineers and Geoscientists BC is the regulatory and licensing body for the engineering and geoscience professions in BC, with over 38,000 registrants. To protect the public, we maintain robust standards for entry to the professions and comprehensive regulatory tools to support engineers and geoscientists in meeting professional and ethical obligations. We are a not-for-profit organization governed by a council of elected registrants and government appointees. Our council is accountable to the public through the Ministry of the Attorney General under the Office of the Superintendent of Professional Governance for both the governance and management of the organization. So Engineers and Geoscientists BC's strategic plan identifies fostering diversity and inclusion as a key principle, and this has been a major strategic focus for the organization. The organization is currently undertaking work in many areas to support the goals of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Later in today's session, in the breakout workshop that I'm leading, I will be sharing more details about a project that we have been working on at Engineers and Geoscientists BC to examine how demographic data we collect, and to make changes, and as well as to look at additional demographic data information that we'd like to gather to better understand our registrants. I'll not only talk about the data we're planning to collect, but also explore why we're interested in this type of information, what it could be used for, and the process we undertook to determine what data and how to ask those questions. At this point, I want to take a few minutes here to share some details about the EDI work being done at Engineers and Geoscientists BC, giving an overview of the bigger picture and how the specific projects of diversity demographic data fits into that overall picture. So on this slide, I've outlined some actions and commitments that have been made by the organization. These actions and commitments build upon one another, driving action throughout the organization and across many of our programs. The list here is not comprehensive in terms of all the actions taken, but it does outline some of our key commitments and steps that have been made to build momentum and action towards building more equitable, diverse, and inclusive professions. So in 2017, the organization developed the 2017 to 2022, so 5-year strategic plan, which identified fostering diversity and inclusion as a key principle. Building upon this, in 2018, our council endorsed the 30 by 30 strategy and guide to action. And this strategy included 3 key areas of focus, which are leveraging our strengths, building relationships to maximize collective strengths, and supporting girls and women along their full career path. And really what this is about is recognizing that as an organization, we need to focus our efforts, maximize where we can have the most benefit or impact, and also working with those other organizations to maximize our collective impacts and efforts. And a great example of that, of course, is the National 30 by 30 network. And the other objective of supporting girls and women along the full career path is really recognizing that although 30 by 30 in itself is, there's one measurement point, we recognize that work and effort to make change and to increase diversity and inclusion within our profession requires that we look at the full career path, not just at that one measurement point. So following that 30 by 30 strategy and guide to action, in 2019, we started developing the 30 by 30 action plan. And in 2020, it was developed and we started actioning the items. There's over 50 items within the action plan. And they touch on a wide range of existing programs as well as identifying new actions. And the action plan continues to evolve, grow, and expand as we complete the actions that are there and identify new actions. And how we identify those new actions is driven by a number of inputs, including registrant feedback, consultation with groups such as Engendering Success in STEM, and through the connections of community and knowledge information sharing that we have through the National 30 by 30 network. And within the action plan, one of the items we identified was the need to examine and revise our diversity demographic data collection, which is what I'll be talking about more in the breakout session. So following this in 2021, so earlier this year, the organization created an EDI statement that was approved by council. And this statement communicates our values and commitments towards EDI and outlines 5 key areas of focus and action for our organization. This includes policies for volunteer recruitment and training and resources for our registrants, our volunteers, and registrant firms, developing a framework to address EDI issues, supporting diversity and inclusion within the professions, and also looking at internal operations to promote a diverse and inclusive work culture for all of our staff. So that gives you a summary of the bigger picture of what's going on at Engineers and Geoscientists BC. I'll leave it there at this point and pass it back over to Lisa.
Thanks very much, Marcy. Mohammed, you'll present your slides next, please.
Thank you, Lisa, and hello, everyone. Glad to be today with everyone and looking forward to our conversation. So the slides will go up shortly. So everything APIGA does to our road to 30 by 30 is under the umbrella of our diversity and inclusion statement that Council has approved a few years ago and endorsed. And it's to encourage a business culture of belonging, inclusion, and diversity for equity within the engineering and geoscience professions. We work internally and externally to support our staff to educate and raise their awareness around EDI best practices, as well as trying to support members and our companies or permit holders. Next slide, please. So on the internal initiatives, we have an APEGA staff EDI group, and the mandate of this group is to raise awareness and educate staff about everything EDI. We believe that it needs to start internally. We need to have everyone understand that EDI is not a one department or one person responsibility, but it falls on every individual and every department leader and organization to work and apply EDI practices in their day-to-day job. So we put sessions, we discuss pressing issues, and we put forward recommendations to our executive team to consider how to apply EDI in the work that we do. We're also building APEGA's EDI framework internally as an organization because we want to walk the talk. So as we work with our members and companies, we want to show them as well that we've applied this stuff internally. And the first component of the EDI framework that APEGA is undertaking is debiasing the hiring process. So we're working closely with our HR department to debias the hiring process and to put a framework around it, structure and behavioral inclusion practices that will eventually lead to diversity, better representation, and ultimately inclusion. We embarked also on internal training, so EDI practices and unconscious bias to all our staff, executive and council. And shortly later this month and in the end of the summer, we'll walk all our statutory committees, volunteers, and staff working with them on an EDI Basics 101 course to understand how EDI can be implemented in the work of the committees that they are chairing or are part of. Next slide, please. On the external front, APEGA has started the 30 by 30 goal in 2010, and we are getting good positive strides. In 2020, we've reached 20% newly licensed professionals. And if we take the overall membership, it's a little bit lower, around 18%, but we're certainly doing positive progress. We've built a strategic plan, and this strategic plan breaks the pipeline into 5 segments. It's on our website, so you can check it out. Out of this strategic plan that has been endorsed by council, we worked on our tactical plans and currently actionable plans that we are executing. A component of that was the wage grant project. It was a 3-year federal grant for $350,000 that we just concluded to study and address systemic barriers that women face in the engineering and geoscience professions. In the breakout rooms, we'll discuss further and we'll share some of the findings of this grant with all of you. We're also putting out webinars and sessions on managing transitions. So when members go on parental leaves, how can they prepare for this leave before, during, and after? And I'm specifically talking about the parental leave because we're encouraging a culture where everyone can take a leave, men or women likewise, and how to prepare for this and how to alleviate the negative impacts that these leaves may have on you as an individual, and how to have the conversation with your supervisors, with the organization and HR departments. All of this work has been supported and guided by the Women in APEGA Advisory Group. It's a group of high-profile members in the community, academia, industry, government, public and private sector that guides and advises us on all the work that we're doing. This is specifically on the member front. However, we think about EDI holistically as well. And earlier in the pipeline, we look at our practices. So our outreach, K-12 outreach events as Science Olympics, we're very careful on the messaging, the marketing, how we promote the event to encourage more girls to participate. We are very careful in the training of our volunteers, in the percentage and the representation of volunteers to make sure that we represent to these children as they are in their first encounter with the profession, the diversity that exists in the profession, and to encourage them, even in the rubrics and how we score these projects, to make sure that they see firsthand and early on that to be a good engineer doesn't only mean that you need to be good at math and science, but it's a whole set of skill set that they can bring and enjoy the strength that they have. Our mentoring program has a component where you can select mentors with specific gender. So matching mentors and mentees to, again, encourage and support young professionals in their career. And finally, our professional development program, we're starting to put EDI sessions to our members, and it will be a part of a bigger training program that will gradually release to our membership, first and foremost to educate and raise awareness, and then eventually to up the skill set of everyone and teach them how to apply EDI practices in their day-to-day job at an individual level, a leader, and an organization. That's an overall summary of what APEGA is doing. We have a great team of staff, and we're looking forward to meeting you in our breakout room to talk about findings of our RAGE grant and answer any questions you may have. Thank you. Next slide will have my contact information. If you have any questions, happy to follow up with you. Back to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Tracy, you are next.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy. Thanks for the introduction, Lisa. I am, my role with the 30 by 30 at PEO is the staff advisor to our task force. So at PEO, there are 4 members that are that were selected to be on the 30 by 30 task force. So they are currently doing the bulk of the work. At the end of this year, they will be stood down, unfortunately, and I'll continue to work in the role of with the 30 by 30. If you'd like to move to the next slide. I'm just going to provide a brief intro over here, and then if you are free to join my breakout room, I'll go through the rest of the slides that I have in my deck. So this slide here just talks a little bit about what we're focused on. So nationally, only 18.1% of newly licensed engineers were women in 2018. And so we found that this percentage has stagnated for the past 5 years. For the purpose of what PEO is doing, we're using 2018 as our baseline for metrics. So our goal is to pull together metrics every year going forward until 2030. And Ontario has a high, if not the highest number of professional engineers of all the provinces in Canada. So the numbers make a significant difference to achieving the 30% goal across Canada. In 2018, you can see that approximately 18% of newly licensed engineers were women. And this has remained the same for 2019. So we're kind of still stuck around the same percentage. So our goal is to keep moving that needle and increase it to 30%. PEO is a little different from the regulators in Canada, whereas our focus is mainly regulatory. So we are split between 2 organizations. There's Ontario Society of Professional Engineers, which is advocacy, and then PEO, which is regulatory. So our main focus is moving that needle of the 30% for newly licensed engineers. Although we work with the other stakeholders involved in the process, our focus is still looking to see how many women will be able to become licensed by 2030. So in 2017, the PEO Council endorsed this initiative, and a task force was established in 2018 to implement this 30 by 30 action plan. So they did find that in order to obtain the 30% goal, each of the key stakeholder groups would need to be engaged along the pathway to licensure to endorse the initiative and sign up for the actions that fall within their responsibility. So the key stakeholders that the task force has pulled together are the universities, the employers of engineers, which will play a significant role in this, organizations that support internationally educated women, any organization that supports engineers, and PEO as a regulator. So in the workshop, I'll continue to go through what our action plan has been and how we work together within our regulator, as well as with the universities and employers. And I'll speak a little bit about our all the metrics that we've pulled together so far. So PEO, again, this has been in place since about 2018. For the purpose of my role, specifically looking at 30 by 30, we do have other EDI initiatives within PEO, but it's not currently under my scope. Thanks very much, and hope to see you in the workshop session.
Thank you, Tracy. Justin, if you'd like to give a brief intro to your slides now, please.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. So just to start, of course, we've talked about being regulators on this call, and we are all representing regulators, but at Paganel, we're one of the smaller regulators across the country. We have about 5,000 license holders for the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, and about 40% of those live in other provinces. We have a lot of projects in Newfoundland and Labrador, and we have a lot of cyclical work. So as a result, many of our members don't actually live inside the province. And the reason that is important is because with 5,000 members and only 9 staff, we felt we had to be really targeted and really specific on the kind of research that we were doing. And getting into that research, the purpose for us, like some of my colleagues have said, one of the purposes was to establish some benchmarks for some comparative data. We didn't really have a whole lot of comparative data until we did our first study back in 2019. Of course, we also wanted to inform our diversity and inclusion committee members in planning. So we, of course, have put forward a diversity and inclusion committee that also works on 30 by 30. And the goal of that committee is to make improvements, not only to Paganel policies, but to provide some insight into things that we can do as a regulator where our scope might fit, where we might have some influence in order to make changes that make improvements for diversity communities. Of course, we have a board of directors and they have an end around diversity and inclusion. I didn't include the wording here today because that's actually being discussed currently at the board and as to how that wording looks. And of course, that informs us on what we do in our diversity and inclusion work as well. And once again, 30 by 30 at career stages. So we at Paganel thought that we had the most influence over employers. And the reason we thought that is because in addition to regulating individuals, we also regulate organizations that do work within the province and for the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. So we have about 650 organizations that are permitted with us. And as a result, a lot of the people who work in those fields in the province work for permit holders. So as a result, we felt like we could really target in on those employers and really try to make a difference with them in terms of their policies, in terms of their structures, and in terms of ways of improving diversity and inclusion, not only for their employees, but for future employees. And so hopefully by making some changes within the workforce, there would be some kind of offset measures that new engineering and geoscience grads would see going forward into the future. Next slide, please. So the collected data, of course, once again, was very pointed and very specific, and I will talk about it more in the breakout room, which will focus more on being a small organization and how we collected that data and how we focused on how we collected that data. But mainly we focused on work environment to gain a better understanding of D&I in the profession. So we sent out a survey to all of our members specifically around their experiences and of being just an engineer and a geoscience. And of course, we asked some biographical data and some diversity data to compare. And the questions were related to many things, such as HR policies, so the things in place currently in their workforce that would help people in any regard or things that they were expected as an employee. We also talked about interactions with coworkers and management. So it could be such little things or microaggressions as small comments or jokes, going up to harassment and bullying and really stronger kind of language and interactions. Of course, we also asked about opportunities, the representation that they and other people had within the organization. So really inclusion types things. So are people at the management table? Are they getting to talk and are they getting to share their opinion when it's important? Of course, we also talked about job satisfaction, compensation, and we also tried to dig a little deeper into whether or not these organizations had existing diversity policies. And then from there, we use that information to really inform some of the tactics that we included in our diversity and inclusion planning. And so that's I guess, an overview of why we collected the data. Of course, once again, we wanted to be pointed and we wanted to ensure that we had some influence over the things that we wanted the data to kind of bear out. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Okay, I think we're just going to have time for one question before we go into the breakout rooms and people can sort of ask you their questions more directly. I know there's so much to talk about around data collection, but I think we'll just start with what your challenges have been in collecting this data. So we'll start with Marcy.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, so I think when I think about collecting data and the work we've done to look at what diversity demographic data we should be collecting, that we want to be collecting, there's a number of challenges. There's sort of considerations, I guess, around privacy, data use, and also disclosure. So recognizing that when we're asking registrants to share with us information about their identities, that there's a lot of people have experiences that have made it very some negative experiences in the past in terms of disclosing data, and making sure that we are planning for how we manage and hold that data, but also making sure that we communicate to our registrants how we're using the data, how we're storing the data, so that we can give them a sense of confidence in terms of their privacy being protected, and also how that data is being used or is not being used in relation to the different programs and services that we offer as a regulator. I think there's also challenges that go with the language you use, the way you ask the questions, and even the answer options you give. And it becomes it's a huge thing. And I'll talk about it more in my breakout session. So I won't dig into it here because I also want to give the other panelists the chance to touch on that. But that was definitely a huge consideration for us, is just the language and the options.
Thank you, Marcy. Mohammed, would you like to answer that question as well, and challenges?
I'll build up quickly on what Marcy shared. And some of the challenges we're facing is data that we're currently collecting is at one point in time, so I consider it as a data point, and our databases haven't been set up in a way to collect demographic data and track it longitudinally, so that you can really track members along their progression for their career. And this makes it a little bit challenging, because we're not really comparing apples to apples. And how can you really figure out the story behind what's going on with the members' journey? So when members leave on a parental leave and then decide to come back and quit for whatever reason, there is no real way for us as of now to track this information. We just know that members joined, members left, but we cannot correlate it to the rest of the information. The other piece is correlation with different dimensions of diversity. When we started breaking down our demographics or our data from a generational standpoint, we see a lot of differences. And it's quite promising when you start looking at the percentage of women in the profession generational wise. So Gen Z and Gen X, the percentage of females in these generations is significantly growing and increasing. So it's saying a very positive story. But when you look at the whole membership, the story is different. So figuring out the right correlation and how to present and narrate the story might make a difference in driving change, and positive change specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Tracy?
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, so for us, one of the challenges is because we're pulling together a number of metrics, a lot of it is internal. So we're putting together our internal licensing metrics, university metrics, leadership metrics, but also the largest part going forward is going to be getting our employers on board. So one of the challenges is definitely trying to get enough stakeholders. A lot of the employers we find are very supportive. So they're interested in becoming a 30 by 30 champion, but they're not exactly willing to take the next steps sometimes. Collecting data can be it's just too much for some companies. They're busy, or they just haven't started collecting it. So it's almost like it's too much of an ask. It's bogging them down a little bit. But what we're asking for is 3 main metrics from employers where we can actually help a PEO with one of them. A lot of other companies too already have their internal EDI programs, so they just want to keep going on with that. And although they're great programs, they're not targeted specifically at obtaining licensure, which is our main focus. So again, our main focus is just trying to get those key stakeholders along the pathway, and trying to get the 3 metrics from them in the next 10 years. We have a chapter system at PEO. So we've got our chapter system helping out and engaging employers. We're rolling out awareness sessions throughout the rest of the year so that we can see who's interested. But again, because a lot of people have different, a lot of employers seem to be focused more on recruitment and retention. They want to put their focus efforts into that right now, and then maybe join a little later when they have their recruitment efforts accomplished. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Tracy. Justin?
Thank you. I think one issue that you often see, and I think this is a common thing that's talked about, is bias both in response and non-response. You see a lot, or at least in our diversity data collection, we see a lot that the people who tend to respond more are the people who are somehow affected by it on a regular basis. So for instance, in our survey, we have about 13% of our members who identify as female, but in the survey, almost 40% of the respondents were female. And that causes some issues, not necessarily in the data, depending on what you're collecting, but it can, but it also presents some issues in the fact that the people who really could also be part of the change and be part of the things that really matter are not paying attention to the data collection, or not paying attention to the data in and of itself. So that creates some problems, because certainly you want to hear from the widest range of people, but you also want to be sure that the data is visible and that the data is being paid attention to. Another thing is, and Marcy touched on this, is the whole idea of want and need. Yes, you have data that you want, but is it data that you necessarily need or are available to get? So for instance, as a regulator, there are only so much data that we're permitted to ask for in our application forms. There's only so much data that we're really allowed to ask for. And really, as a regulator, one of the things that we do is we make sure people are suitable for licensure. And some of the best practices around determining whether or not someone is suitable for licensure involves getting rid of some of the data that could include bias. So someone's name or someone's gender, maybe where they're from, the language is spoken. So in a lot of places, you're seeing people put forward a candidate without that identifying information. And as a result, collecting that data can sometimes seem like it has a bias, or you don't really have a need for it. So it is challenging to make sure that the data that you're asking for, as Marcy said, that you really lay out why you need it and what you're going to do with it, because I think people, really want to make sure that their data is being used properly and that it's being used in a way that is productive and beneficial for the people giving it to you.
Thank you, Justin. So we are now going to move into our breakout sessions. I know it will probably be difficult for our participants to decide which session to go to, but we will regroup after that and just have a little, a short discussion then about some of the main points that came out, the main questions that came out. So Cassandra, did you want to take us into the breakout rooms?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for everyone for these great presentations. I think you're getting everyone thinking, and I'm sure everybody's holding off their questions in the chat. So that's right. So each panelist will run a workshop in the breakout room. So we're just, if you don't mind, just being patient with us as we open up the breakout rooms, get everything all set up and labeled. But each of the breakout rooms will be labeled with the panelist name, so you'll know where you're going. We won't, unfortunately, we don't have the capability of recording the breakout rooms. I know it's really unfortunate, but that is why we've kept in mind that you might want to pop in and out of the breakout rooms. So you do have that capability. You'll just, when you're in a breakout room, you can then hover and find the breakout tab and then go into another room. So that's totally available to you. So like we said, go into the breakout rooms once they're opened. Just be patient. The panelists are also getting there. And then the panelists will each have some presentations, a bit of slides to show you, and then you're welcome to ask questions, and that should be pretty fluid. Again, we'll give about 30 minutes for the workshops, and then we'll notify you when we're closing down the workshops and inviting you to join us in the plenary. And as Lisa said, there'll be another opportunity to hear from all the panelists all together, sharing their thoughts and insights. So I won't hold you off. I think I'm just checking to see if the breakout rooms are open. They are. So if you just hover on the menu on the bottom, you'll see breakout rooms, or you'll see 3 dots, and you'll be able to click on more. You can go to the breakout rooms once they have opened with the appropriate names. Just go right ahead. And if you have questions, you can always come back to the main room. The rest of us will be here, happy to answer your questions and get you the technology support that you need. So go right ahead, enjoy your breakouts. I hope everyone's discussions went really well. I was kind of popping in and out, and it seems like it was quite lively and lots of questions, so it's great. Just gonna wait for everyone to reconvene. So as we all come back, I want to thank everyone, and hopefully everybody had a great chance to discuss and ask questions and really dive into some of the details of what these amazing regulator champions are doing. So we return to the main room now, and I'll invite the panel to come back to the stage, the virtual stage. And perhaps, Lisa, I'll pass it on to you to kind of guide a little bit of a discussion before we wrap it up.
Sure. I actually want to turn to I just want to see, you can volunteer here, panelists. If there was a main point, a question that came back, maybe multiple times, or that was something that you think is important to touch on for the whole group that came up in your discussion, I won't call on each one of you individually. I'll see if any one of you wants to bring forward a highlight, but I did take some notes on some of the things I got to hear in some of the rooms, so I can move on to the next question if nobody has anything to volunteer right away.
I could jump in, Lisa, and I know you heard my last question. I had 2 great questions in my group. One was specifically around targeting and finding better ways to inspire people to participate in diversity and inclusion data collection. But another was just based on just getting people involved. And I think one of the great points that came out of there is that, at least I hope it was helpful, is that, the buy-in really needs to happen at all levels of an organization. And I think being able to say that your management is involved and working on even small ways to help their employees improve the diversity and inclusion within their organization really does go a long way. And I know that can be challenging in many senses, but really, it really does start at the top. And hopefully some of you on the call are part of that top and will take that message going forward.
I think with all the pressures, time pressures people have, including management, it's really a struggle sometimes to just show how it is an investment, right? It's a strategic investment in terms of recruiting, retaining talent, and also making sure that that you really are keeping good people. And that does have to happen at the top to make sure that there's resources put behind it in terms of time and money. Anybody else?
I'd say, Lisa, one question that kept coming back up is involvement of permit holders and how we get companies to buy into the EDI work. And I think this is important when some regulators do not regulate companies. APEGA certainly does, but even when you regulate companies, you regulate the engineering and geoscience professions or the technical component. Your purview is limited. You cannot step in and question how their HR departments are running their own practices. This is way off our purview. One thing that we're constantly starting to entertain and talk to members and others about is EDI practices at an individual level, at a leader's level, and at an organization level. It is important to understand EDI does not fall on one person. So anyone can be part, anyone can take an active role. As an individual, bare minimum is not to be a bystander when you see something, to speak up, to learn, educate, and inform yourself and others around you. When you are in a leadership position, you wear an additional hat because you have a responsibility for those working around you and areas that you can control and influence, and the practices applied there, basic from hiring to promotion, performance review, and so on and so forth. But at an organization level and as an executive, there is way more that you can do in terms of pay equity analysis, putting proper practices in place, constantly reviewing and challenging practices in your space, and truly understanding that recruiting certain individuals is merely representation, but you need to move this further to being like a diverse workforce. It's about diversity of thought and to truly have an inclusive climate and culture within your organization. It is hard, it is challenging. The best we can do is to try to influence the thinking by introducing these guidelines, practices, and encouraging them to use it and be this source of knowledge and expertise that they can come back to through our relationship with them to get some guidance. And from members to understand there is limited ability of us to influence or to impose anything on the HR departments.
Thank you, Mohammed. Marcy or Tracy, did you have any highlight that you wanted to share?
Yeah. So one of the discussion points that came up in our breakout was building on what Justin had said about when we collect data and who's responding and how do we adjust for lack of response from certain groups or over or under representation. And so one of the things that I thought it was important to sort of bring up and maybe share with the entire group here is the difference between diversity data and inclusion data. And so, when we talk about diversity, that's about representation. So, when we measure the percentage of women registered in any of our provinces, or the number of individuals identifying as Indigenous, those types of measures are diversity data. So that's representation. And so when we collect that data, even if it's optional, it doesn't, it's up to people to choose to disclose that information. But inclusion data is about people's experience. It's about the sense of connection and belonging. So that's not, even if you have 50% women in your organization, in your registered as engineers in your province, that doesn't mean you necessarily have inclusion, right? You may have achieved a metric in terms of diversity, but inclusion is about individuals' experiences and those, the culture, the sense of belonging. And so how we measure those is different, and how we collect that data and compensate for, if we're receiving under or over representation changes when we're looking at inclusion data versus just diversity data.
Thank you so much, Marcy. Tracy?
Hi, yeah, so we had a few good questions come up. I did have a few questions that I asked the group. One was more around factors that are important for achieving gender parity. We had somebody in the breakout group from educational institution who said, it's even tough in the education level or in the university level to even reach that percentage of women. So that maybe you get girls into the program, but you're not retaining them as much. So is it the fact that the work is just too much? Is it too hard? One thing that came up was the programs, different types of, like Go Eng Girl, or different types of programs in the school that would be attractive for students. And again, like at PEO, we're focused more on the licensing portion, but we do look at the whole pipeline, and that it starts kind of at the bottom at getting kids interested from K to 12 and getting them into university and hopefully retaining them there. Another thing that came up was again, the interest in applying to jobs. Is there issues with with the job postings? What is it that's keeping women from applying to certain places or certain postings? So we see a lot that companies are getting a whole bunch of applicants, but not enough women. Someone raised the issue that some of the streams are more mechanical or electrical fields, which tend to have a lower percentage of females. And a lot of times it's how you're wording the actual job posting as well. And having internal programs in a company showing that your company is on the path to helping their EITs become licensed, and you have all kinds of programs to help them get there. Yeah, so those were the main ones. I know we didn't get to a few questions, and one question that people were very interested in was how to formally or informally introduce changes to the workplace. So hopefully at another time we can get more into that.
Thank you so much. I know we've come to the end of our time here. And just before I thank you, I did see a few times in the comments or in different panels that the question about non-binary gender identities, I know it was addressed in some rooms, but maybe not in all. And we are looking at this as well in Manitoba for non-binary and two-spirit identities. And I just want to say that I think it's important to recognize that this is not new, right? Those identities have always existed. And so this is a reclamation, and we will only have more accurate data giving these options to people, affirming gender options. I want to thank you all so much for participating. I've taken many notes and I've learned a lot. Really, this is going to help inform my work in Manitoba, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of the audience members who joined us. Cassandra, do you have any closing words?
Oh, for sure. And I also had, there are some questions about whether or not any of you would be interested or able to share any of the surveys that you use or questions, EDI questions that you have. Lots of the participants would be interested in receiving those afterwards. So, and I know you've shared with us your PowerPoints from each of the workshops. So I just want to make sure that that's okay with you all, and we can share with you, we could share with the participants afterwards, whoever's able to do that. So again, thank you all so much. What a great discussion to cap off our second day of our 30 by 30 conference. Again, I want to thank Lisa for guiding us through, and thank each of the speakers, Marcy, Justin, Mohammed, and Tracy, for sharing the amazing work that you're doing in your jurisdictions. This is really a great chance for us to dive in deeper and get to know each other, really bring visibility to the work that you're doing in your individual regulator. So again, I want to thank you all so much. We're going to be having another one of these days next week, Wednesday, June the 16th. We have our third session for the 30 by 30 conference, and then again on June 23rd. So inviting everybody to join us again. You do have to register for each session of the conference, and if you haven't done that yet, please do that. There should be a registration link in the chat. Next week's session will feature some best practices from post-secondary institutions and regulators in creating systemic change. We have panelists from the University of British Columbia, Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, Engineers Yukon, and the Canadian Engineering Accreditation Board will present on their work and practices. So thank you all again, and have a wonderful day, and happy Pride Month.